Thanks.
Buy it back. I will buy it back.
Walmart, all those.
Maybe the 1, 2, I think 8 now, I don't know.
Yeah, no. For insurance coverage?
But it's gonna get worse. I'm just so happy I'm out.
You guys want cake?
Cake.
One cake? Yeah. You okay, Ken?
Carpenter? Coats and ties on tonight, especially Frank over here. Tonight's really a fundraiser. We invited Mr. Hobbyhorse to come down. He's going to take the speech and
You messed up my speech. I was going to tell him I came down from NBC in New York just for this occasion.
That's who you're going to sell the tape to.
What time's it gonna be on TV?
6:30 tomorrow night.
6:30.
Sunday morning at 8 o'clock.
But if you noticed, our speaker and I came in a little bit late, and we were down in the lobby talking a little bit, and one thing led to another, and I found out that our speaker was in the Pacific Ocean in the 40s during the war, and I was walking around in diapers. So it's amazing how time flies. But Tom Critchlow moved to Talbot County in 1933. He lives down at World Farm Road on Island Creek, and he's going to talk to us about his distinguished war experiences. Tom?
Thank you, Larry.
Larry called and asked me to talk about this being the 50th anniversary of the end of the war. They wanted me to talk about it too. So I'm going to tell you about my experiences, which were in submarines during World War II. Here's a picture of a boat, or a boat like ours, rather. That's what we were talking about there. And, I'll pass this around to give you some idea what it was like inside. Anyhow, and here's some pictures of the boats in Pearl Harbor. I got into submarines like everybody else in submarines. You had to volunteer. You don't go into it except as a volunteer. And it's a very tough thing to get in. It's very easy to get out. If you don't do right, you're out. Good, tough service. And I got in before the war, and as a reserve officer, which was unusual because they never had any reserves in submarines. But they, as the war went on, they had quite a few. But, I had volunteered for the Navy first as a B-7, then went on and midshipman cruise and went down to Panama and Guantanamo on the bar assault, and then came back and was lucky enough to go to the Naval Academy, and they had a bunch of us reserves there one time. Never did it again. It didn't work too good, I guess. And then, as an experiment, they put us into submarines, about 50 of us. And after a summer of that, they kept 13 of us and sent us to submarine school, and the others they sent back into the fleet. They didn't go into submarines. And then after I went through sub school, graduated from sub school just in time for Pearl Harbor. And so, as far as I was concerned, we began Christmas Day of '41 sailing from Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And we went straight from there to Panama, to Pearl Harbor. Took 3 days to take on fuel and supplies, and then took off for Tokyo. We got to Pearl, it was still smoking. You know, it had been many weeks before when they all blew up. And it was a sight to see. For example, the harbor, I remember they had tugboats going around there towing barges, a big scoop on the barge, and they were scooping up oil, which was that thick. It was heady bunker B oil. And the oil would just slide up into barges like that. It was coming out of those sunken battleships all around there. The airplane hangars were still smoking. It was just unbelievable. And we were the only thing between the NIPS, submarines that is. The surface fleet had just been knocked out. There wasn't any way to defend anything. So there were 40 boats at that time in the Pacific, a lot of them in the Philippines. And it was a very thin line of us because to go from Pearl to Tokyo, for example, took 3 weeks to get out, 3 weeks to get back, then you're about 3 weeks on station, and then you had a couple weeks to get overhauled. By the time you spread those 40 boats out, you weren't much of a protection line between Japan and Australia, for example, too. It was a very thin group. But off we went anyhow. I'll tell you something about life on board the boats. Because, first place, the boats, as you see in that picture, they were 307 feet long. They were long and lean, 27 feet wide. We drew 17 feet of water on surface. We drew a lot of water. And we carried around 70 men total on board, or 76 sometimes. We generally had 4 Naval Academy officers, 2 reserve officers. That was the officer complement, and then the rest were the enlisted men. And they were the cream of the crop. We had the finest enlisted people anybody ever had. Beautifully trained and highly qualified. And they kept that boat going. In fact, they did it almost without supervision because we didn't have really much time to do that and do our duties of standing watches and diving and doing this and doing that. But they did, and I'll tell you about that too. But off we went on our first patrol, and we found out what war was all about in a hurry. We found out it was very exciting, and sometimes it was absolutely terrifying. And we didn't need that, but it did happen. And the first experience was off Tokyo. We had no radar in those days. It was the first bomb, aircraft came over and dropped a bomb on us. Well, we saw it coming. It was at night. And fortunately, somebody picked it up and saw it. So we dove, and we were down before the bomb went off. But that woke us all up. From then on, we were really looking. In fact, every time Venus would come up at night, everybody crash dive because they thought there was another aircraft coming. Panic party. And we had a green crew, green officers, and a green captain. And the skipper was too old for the job. And he trained us. He had drills and drills and drills going out, condition A, B, C, D, E, and so on, to the point where it was very confusing. And he came up one night on the bridge and called for condition B. He forgot that we were already partly flooded down. And the first thing we knew, we were going down. And I cleared the bridge, got the lookouts below and so on. I would follow them below because I was diving officer. And the time I got to the control room, which you'll see a picture of it in there, to take the dive, the water was coming through the conning tower hatch so much, I couldn't get up there lateral. All they could get up to do was pull that hatch closed. Well, we got the boat under control, and then I surfaced, and we figured everybody was drowned in the conning tower because the rest of them didn't come down through the conning tower. Well, they were sending water up to their waist instead. They'd gotten their hatch closed just a minute before. Well, now our enlisted man came in. We had to drain that conning tower down through the control into the pump room below us. Well, that was the trim pumps. Those were pumps that, help bail out the ballast tank, run the periscope motors, do this, do that, and so on. Air compressors. And it flooded that. So we had to pull off station. And these enlisted went down there, took those motors apart, cleaned them up, rewound this, did that, and within 2 weeks they had us back on station. And done all right on board. Shows you how well trained and skilled these people were. Well, then we got back on station, and fortunately we did find a ship, and it was a mile offshore. We were a mile offshore. We came by and we sank it. So that made it worthwhile anyhow. But then we had to come home, and it was a very demoralized crew when we got home. The captain had gotten everybody so jittery that we weren't worth a hoot. And we'd been well depth charged too after that ship too, I might add. Well, it sent the old man home. Poor guy, he had a breakdown. He never did go back to sea. But we got a new captain, and he was a winner. Billy Lynn. So we went back on patrol again. We had 5 days on the beach. This was not very much. And back this time we went to Nagasaki, and which is on the west side of Japan. And on our way there, we found a small tanker. We sank it, and then we found another one. It was a big ship, a really big ship, and it came out. So we made an attack on it. Well, before we even got started, their aircraft had spotted us. The ship was coming out of the harbor, Nagasaki Harbor, and he dropped a couple of big bombs on us. But we went ahead with our attack and fired. And then that's when we really began to find out that we were having difficulty with torpedoes. The American submarine Navy had a terrible time with torpedoes, and it turned out that the Germans had the same problem with torpedoes at the beginning of their war too, to the point where they couldn't get their crews to go to sea because they were almost mutiny because the torpedoes weren't any good. And in this case, what happened was we fired our torpedoes. We had fired 4 torpedoes in a spread like that. We call it a 4-fish spread. And this one hit, and these 2 went under and never went off. Well, it sank the ship, and that was a big deal because it was full of engineers going to Borneo, oil engineers. But the NIPS said that we sank 5,000 women and children, which was pretty likely they'd be leaving Nagasaki going south at that time of year, the war being well on. But they were really upset. And so upset that they then settled in to give us a depth charge at the end all. And it went on for 23 hours. Over 70 of those babies went off. And it busted the gauges all over the boat. Couldn't have lights, headlights in the overhead, but the depth charges would do like that, it would shatter the light bulbs. We had to later wire them so they just hung like an original light bulb. It wasn't even hooked to anything. So when it would go like that, the bulb would break. And the glass on the depth gauges, it shattered. Later on, they fixed them, put some bars across there so the glass wouldn't come out. So then the whole Critchlow jumped off the track and flew across. After that, we learned we just took them off and put them on the deck. Didn't do it. Well, we had time getting away from them because it'd been a propeller shaft, and that was making a lot of squeaking noises, and therefore they could follow us. But on we went. And then we went on, racing through the Bungo Suido, which is a big channel south of Tokyo, to try to catch an aircraft carrier that was coming north that the High Command had intercepted on the radio. We saw it, but it was going too fast, too far. We didn't do it. So then he called us home for the Battle of Midway. And we got there just in time. And we had a cameraman named John Ford was there, a famous movie director, standing on the dock taking pictures of this pending battle. And so we pulled in there. He said, take on some fuel, and everybody gets a shower, and get back on board and get out of here. So everybody did, except a third of us got to stay. So Junior got to stay on board. And the captain said, now, young man, if an aircraft come over here for your air raid, you take this boat to sea. Aye, sir. And darn if it didn't happen. And here, next thing I know, I'm taking that thing out. I said, I'm going back to sea with a third of the crew and little old me. Well, fortunately, they had a PT boat, and they caught up with us and cut off board, and off we went. And it didn't didn't get any action in the Midway. We saw a lot, heard a lot, but unfortunately we didn't get a crack at shooting anybody. We did come home to a hero's welcome. Admiral Nimitz was there on the dock because of our sinking that liner, and with a brass band. He came aboard in the wardroom, and it was pretty great to have the commander-in-chief down there with you for a minute. Nice guy. So then we had to go on another patrol. This time we went to Truck, which is in the middle of the Pacific, and we were covering Truck, which is a big atoll, and big enough to hold a whole fleet if you wanted there. And our troops were landing at Guadalcanal. It was the first landing down there, and we were to stay up there and report if any Japanese ships came out of Truck to go down there. So we laid off there for 40 days. And it was pretty tiring game because they had a Q ship that would come out every day that had a plane on board. It was a seaplane. And they'd launch that rascal, and every day he'd find us, and every day he'd drive us down. And we couldn't fire on the Q ship because it was small, and one of our torpedoes would not have worked anyhow. And so we did this back and forth, back and forth. Finally, a tanker did come by, and we did catch him and sank him. That was good. But then his escorts caught us, and that wasn't good because we got another big depth charging. And at that time too, we had learned from the British that there are different temperatures in the water all over the oceans, and they had learned to use them, which we did there. Truck in the equatorial area anyhow. But you could go down through this warm water and catch a band of cold water, just like the springs when you're out swimming out here. You know, you feel a spring sometimes. You catch one of those things, and you could literally float on that cold water with the boat. What you had to do was be very careful, because if there was a hole in that water, so it was warm water, that we could fall right through the thing just like you fell off into a building. And they lost a lot of boats that way too. But it made it so that when you were being depth charged, sometimes you could break through this layer and then go down and get on another layer. And then when they were sending sound waves down, it came down, and the sound wave would be bent like it was going through a prism. And they thought we were there, but we weren't. We were over here because the sound wave came down and did that instead of that. But it made it so you could go down and stop running and be silent for a few minutes. And that was one way you could escape from the depth charging. What we learned there. We went on from there to Perth, Australia, and Fremantle. And that was an interesting place to go and stay there. The place was really down to wartime. There were no men at all. Perth was about the size of Wilmington, I think, in those days. Very primitive. And when they didn't have any, there was no coffee. We were looking for coffee. Couldn't find any coffee. They didn't have any coffee. Didn't have any sugar either. So what sugar they did have, they hoarded and would make cakes for us. That's the way those Aussies were. From Australia, we went on north to Borneo on our next patrol. And we patrolled the Straits of Macassar at that time. And that was interesting because the Straits of Macassar are fairly shallow. And one time off Balikpapan, we'd made a run on a ship, and we're getting depth charge again, and we couldn't get away because we'd gotten in a saucer right off the harbor there. It was deep enough to cover us. It took 67 feet to cover everything, the periscope shears, the works, everything. And there we were in about 90 feet of water, but we couldn't get away from it. We were in this saucer, and they were homing in on us. What saved us was the fact that when they would drop a depth charge, the echoes would keep ricocheting back and forth on the edges as the saucers were, so they couldn't tell exactly where we were, so we could make a quick move over to the other edge and wait again. And then pretty soon along came a thunderstorm, and we caught it through the periscope, when it got going really good, we surfaced and were able to duck out through the heavy rain and jump over the edge of the saucer and get a D replaced and go down again. It got away. Then, I can't tell you something about the life on board was, when we were doing all this, was a pretty good life. Most people had a battle with trying to get enough sleep. We were always tired, always tired. We started out with the best food in the whole Navy. But of course, after a week or so, we had run through that, even though we had a big refrigerator store. But it was dried eggs and dried potatoes and dried this and dried that. And the food got to be pretty hard to take on. And the laundry, there wasn't any laundry because we couldn't carry enough water for everybody, and we had to make water with a distilling plant. But the batteries required this distilled water every night. So what was left over, we used for drinking water. And we had enough water to do the dishes once a day for 76 people. And no baths, no shaves, no nothing, no laundry, no nothing. We were a sweet crowd to be around. If it rained and you had to watch that, you were lucky because you were topside, you got wet. And the boat was always hot. It had air conditioning, but again, the batteries were always hot from being charged and discharged. You see, every day we would be submerged. Every night we'd have to surface. Every night we'd have to charge the batteries again. And when you're charging a battery, there's the chemical action going on, and it gets hotter and hotter. They're right under your feet. You had to wear sandals because you couldn't walk on the deck barefoot. It was too hot. And the boat would turn around 90 degrees until the depth charging. And then you had to shut the air conditioning off. It would go up to 110, 120. It's just the way it was. So it wasn't a very comfortable place to be a lot of times. But everybody lived through it. Now, after being up there around Valley Patton and so on, then we got another ship. We were still having trouble with our torpedoes. Everybody was. And like the high command took some torpedoes back to Pearl, and they dropped them right off Diamond Head, several hundred feet on the rocks just to see. And they didn't go off. The exploder, these guys had since 1918 till then to develop an exploder mechanism that worked. It didn't work. And these things were supposed to be set off magnetically, and it didn't work. So as far as we were concerned, it was just like saying, let's play games. I'll fire my torpedo. As soon as you spot us, you come on over and give us a good shaking up. That's all what happened. It was pretty hard. Anyhow, they did do that. And so the high command said, look, take all the torpedoes off the boat. And you load up the mines and go to Haiphong and lay mines in the harbor. So we were one of the first boats to lay mines. And so we went across the China Sea and got over there and laid our mines the way we were supposed to, which they were very fussy about that. They were drawn on the chart exactly the way they wanted them, and they had to be so feet apart and so on. And so we played games going out with little wooden blocks on the wardroom table, practicing because we had 6 tubes forward, torpedo tubes, 4 torpedoes aft. These things would be pushed out, the forward tubes, and then the after tubes, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. It took a lot of careful timing and working, but and dodging junks and sand pans and stuff like that at the same time. But we did do it, although the 5th mine that we pushed out did go off shortly after we left there. But the rest of them stayed. And we came out and so we had 2 torpedoes on board and no mines, nothing else. And we got a notice from the high command saying, the ship coming north with diplomats on board. it's all lit up, and let her go by. Don't sink it. I said, so sure enough, we got off the Gulf of Tonkin. Here came this ocean liner by, all lit up. It was great. And we let her go by. And there came another ship. It was all lit up too. That was great too. And so, then another one. Then we thought, wait a minute. So we got the line. Well, we tracked it. And got the course and speed absolutely perfect. Could be better. It was at night. We were on surface. And so we ran up ahead and made a normal approach course, which was at right angles to them. And I was on the bridge with the skipper because I could see so well. I was a plotting officer anyhow. And we fired a torpedo. Watch it go. And there it went, right under the boat. And that was all she wrote. So the old man checked the problem. I said, turn around, check the problem, did it all over again, and fired the next torpedo. And watch it go, and pow, it did right amidships. The air flask, which was running the torpedo, blew up. Nothing else. And so that was that. The lights went out. We dodged and got out of there in a hurry. But not soon enough, because it was just about dawn. And just about that time, along came a Corvette out of the blackness that we hadn't spotted. And that rascal drove us down. And he really just about finished us off. But he drove us down so hard that we hit the bottom and wiped out our sound gear. And his depth charge was so good that it cracked some of our batteries. And we got some water in them. And when you get seawater on a battery, you get chlorine gas. And we had chlorine gas in the boat. Well, that was a beaut. And we were down there quite a while. Everybody got sick as a dog. And when finally we were able to service, got up there, you could hardly take a breath, just like a knife going through you. And our teeth all loosened up. And it was nothing to do but go home in a hurry, which was 3 weeks away almost. But went back to Perth, Australia with that. And that was 5 patrols. Well, now you're only supposed to make 3 patrols, but it was wartime and there wasn't anybody to take your place. And we'd been rotating the crew. Every time we came in, we'd lose a third of the crew because they were taking them back to the States to put on new boats to train more people, and so on. It was a constant rotation. But, and our skippers, by that time we had 5 skippers, and they'd gone back. Some of them just wore out already. And so anyhow, I was supposed to go back. My brother-in-law, Benitez, who lives in St. Easton right now with me, Admiral Benitez, he was my shipmate for 5 patrols. And he came home, married my sister, incidentally, without my permission. So, but anyhow, we were both going to go back and get new boats ourselves. And at the last minute, the guy that was supposed to relieve me, the guy from Yale, he decided he really didn't want to go to war after all. And so they turned to me and they said, well, how about you one more time? I said, okay, one more time. So off we went, this time to the Bay of Bengal and off to Rangoon in the Rotary Peninsula. And it was slim pickings up there. We had a small ship. They got in a gunfight with him. He had 5-inch guns. And it was very thrilling having those 5-inch shells go whistling right overhead. One in the wake and then one on the bow, and so on. But it didn't get quite bracketed. But it was part of a convoy. And we kept chasing him though. And so later we got one of those fellows, but we didn't get the rest of them. So we chased them all night, the convoy, and they spotted us. We couldn't get ahead of them. So we kept going, and then in the daytime, we just kept going anyhow, because we just determined we were going to get some of those guys. And so we were charged along, trying to get way ahead of them, and we were spotted by aircraft. And they came over and dropped a bomb on us. Saw them coming, and dove, and the bomb caught us as we were passing 90 feet. Well, that one was put the finishing touch on us. It landed right over the after torpedo room hatch and caved in that area. We lost the propeller, and it just bit the other shaft and drove us right to the bottom. Fortunately, we had just passed the fathom mark, because we've been in a couple thousand fathoms, and by that time we were back down in the 270 feet of water, so we could sit on the bottom. That was lucky, because that's all we could do. So we sat there all day fighting fire and flood, because the salt water coming down over the electric motors and so on set everything on fire, all the electric connections and so on. And we would get it out, and it would come back, get it out, and come back. And of course we had the smoke and everything else. Air was bad. Got bad or worse. We'd had this before, and you had to put carbon dioxide out in trays to soak up the carbon monoxide. But after all day long down there, we were able to surface, and that was it. We had enough air to blow to get up, but we couldn't go anyplace, because first of all we had 4 diesels running beautifully, and no way to get any power on the one screw we had, because the motor room had flooded. It was diesel electric. So there we were sitting up there fat, dumb, and happy. We couldn't back up, couldn't go ahead, couldn't do anything. And they sent an aircraft out after us, and we shot him down. And then we stayed around there, and pretty soon along came a Corvette, or 2 Corvettes, and there was nothing to do then but scuttle the boat. So we put everybody overboard, and we had a rubber raft, about a 2-man rubber raft. There was a mess cook and a Filipino. They got in that with cigarettes. Big help that was. And the rest of us went swimming with mumps and lungs on. And so we scuttled the boat, and everybody swimming there, and they picked us all up. No reason, because they were charitable with us, because they liked us. But they'd never captured a crew of an American boat before. So naturally, we were good pickings. And so they took us aboard, and I'll never forget, I climbed that cargo net to get on this thing, and somebody indicated empty your pockets, so I emptied my pockets, and I smoked a pipe like Dave, and put it all on deck, and they handed me back my wallet. We didn't care to take the money out of it, because it was Australian money. We didn't want them to know where the heck it came from. And gave him a pipe, I stuck it in my mouth like this, next thing you know, wow, a sword, it nipped the all up a saber, knocked that pipe right out of my mouth, just like that. That woke me up, I'll tell you. These guys were playing for keeps. And so they put us all in a no-speak situation, sitting on deck, and it's a weird feeling to be, suddenly realize you're a prisoner. I mean, you're sitting there, and you can't go where you want to go, you can't do what you want to do, you can't do anything. And including no-speak. Well, took us into Penang, and that was the beginning of an inquisition that went on for 10 days, where they just, every day they beat the heck out of everybody, and questioning and questioning and beating and questioning, and one forgot to feed us too. We didn't eat for 10 days, and I could reach out of my cell and catch a petal of a flower, and that was about it. And got dengue fever in there too, remember. Then they put us on a ship and took us to Singapore and put us in a camp there with a bunch of Sikhs that had been captured in Singapore. And these guys were all working for the dips on the docks or someplace like that. Powerful babies I ever saw. They were being fed, and they were doing heavy work. And they even had tree trunks there with handles carved out. These guys are using for weightlifting. So they were really powerful guys. And we were segregated from them with a wire fence. They used to send a little fellow over there we called Gunga Din. And they had all thought we were going to lead them to escape. We need, we weren't even sure where the heck we were, let alone how do you get out of there. And then they put us on another ship after a few weeks there. They didn't beat us up there, but it didn't feed you too well. And took us to Saigon and then to Tokyo, not to Tokyo, to Kobe. And then we were split apart. And the officers were sent to a questioning camp in Tokyo, and the enlisted men were sent to work camps in copper mines where we were working on the docks. And so I spent 9 months in Pune. That was a no-speak camp. So you were in a cell by yourself and no speak. It was a pretty depressing place, I'll tell you. And they had just the submarine officers and some aircraft carrier people there, and a few Italians from the Italian embassy. How they got in there, I don't know. And a Chinese and some Aussies. So then we went from that camp to another camp, to another camp, to another camp, to another camp, and just kept moving us. Some of us were moving with me anyhow, and 2 or 3 of us camp to camp to camp. And finally in April 43, no, that's when we went down in April 43, but it was, we were up in Rotary, and that was north of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and all that crap. But we did see the bomb go off. Didn't know it. But when we were sitting outside, standing outside, and all of a sudden the sun, just like it was going to set, it got very dark, and then came back again. But something put the sun out, and we thought, wow, what in the world was that all about? It took a long time. And then the nip guards were very excited, and then they suddenly became very quiet, and the next day they wouldn't say a word. And it turns out the bomb had been dropped. We thought it was a dry ice bomb maybe or something like that. And then a couple of days later, the Japanese camp commander came in and said, now that the war is over, I want the camp commander and the camp doctor and the camp yeoman, the secretary, to go with us to meet the Swiss Red Cross. So they bundled them all in a dump truck and took off. They went down to Kyoto, and they didn't know where they were going. And they met the Swiss, and the Swiss said, "Where are you?" And they said, "We don't know where we are." And nobody could tell them where we were. And so they said, "Well, then go back with these guards, and here's some paint, paint the roof of the building with a Red Cross, and look for the B-29s will come by and drop you some food. And when they do, you stay right in camp. Don't do that, because otherwise you're going to get hurt." Well, they did, and they said it was a wild ride, because they said on these mountain roads, the dump trucks was only one road wide. They had a time, because they'd meet another truck, and the Japanese guards would jump out of this truck, and they'd have a battle royal right to there with their big sabers going like this, and they'd make the other guys back up to keep them going. They had the right of way. But they came back. Well, it took the 29s about 10 days to find us up in these mountains. And they made a mistake, because they told us to stay in the camp. Well, the first load came in camp. I remember a 50-gallon drum of peaches came right through the galley and killed a Japanese cook right then and there. And by the time the next cans came down, we were a country mile outside of that place, I'll tell you. Everything was coming down in parachutes, and were opening or not opening, and spreading all over the place. And then about 2 days later, here came a bunch of GIs trudging up the mountain with a bunch of nurses on board. And so they picked us up, and they said, "Well, you march out." And they looked at us, they said, "The way these guys are going to march out of here, they can't get out of here at all. You got to drive them out." So the nips reluctantly had to produce some trucks to get us out of there. and they took us to Tokyo, and we got home. And that was the end of the war. Any questions?
You're a good storyteller. Great story.
Any questions?
What's the name of your boat?
Grenadier. That's a fish, believe it or not. All the boats are named after fish. Our squad was sub-round 6, and we lost 11 out of the 12 boats. These were all early boats, you see. And a lot of them, we never did find out what happened to them. Lost a lot of good friends out there, I'll tell you.
Do you communicate with any of your crew, or?
Yeah, well, with the crew keeps a pretty good letter, what's left of us now.
Yeah.
We lost 4 in prison camp. But the fellow named Palmer has done a wonderful job, he was the yeoman, of kind of keeping in correspondence. And we have a monthly letter that comes out. He's down there at Ocean Pines now.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, but none of the officers, the skipper, only saw one skipper, Fitzgerald. He was the most recent skipper, and he died a year ago. But I never saw any of the other skippers again. And one other officer, George Whiting, is now in Norfolk. He was a force driver when he got out. And, but that's all. The others I've lost track of entirely. Well, one was in Florida. I knew he was there, but never got there to see him.
Any other questions? Well, Dave, I heard Tom kept the Easton Rotarians spellbound. Now, I certainly believe it. Let's give him a super hand. We'll never forget this, and hopefully you won't forget us. Here's a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
I'd like to get you to draw our 50/50 too. Right?
Right. That's one with no name on it. That's it. 180040.
First one.
040.
Not me.
Yep.
That's you.
And Paul?
Joe.
Poor Paul.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
We still have a 4-way test to do. Is it the truth?
Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Great, great, great. Yeah, I'll be there.